Let's take a look at the Kubler-Ross framework or model of grief. And it's called Kubler-Ross because Kubler and Ross have more or less described it. As far as I know, they haven't described it in the way we are going to see it in a couple of minutes. Or if you see it sometimes, if you Google this change curve, it is sometimes called the change curve. But nevertheless, they have described, and that is the part of it that is not so nice. They have tried to figure out what are the stages people go through if they lose someone, for example. And as you can imagine, that is not a very nice thing, losing people. And they have found out, and sometimes I think that is even worse, that it is called the change curve now. So it seems as if people in organizations go to similar stages, go through similar stress as if they have stress when they lose someone. And I find that is a very horrible idea, but nevertheless, this is how it is often referred to. And I think it's quite appropriate to look at the curve and to use the change curve or the model of grief as some kind of an assessment to figure out where are the people, the individuals in the change process. And if you look at the curve, and I'm now going to show you the whole framework and I'm going to walk you through it step by step, you see it's kind of an up and down that people go through, and they go from stability to acceptance or adaptation. So we want people to go very, very fast to the acceptance and adaptation phase. That this is not happening in reality is common sense, I would say. But anyways, let's go back to the framework. In the beginning, there is stability. People don't think that something bad can happen. And then something happens. For example, in an organization, I made the experience myself once. Someone says, we have an issue, we don't make money anymore. And people would say, okay, what's going on? And you probably remember Kotter, the 8 steps, or some of the other frameworks, create a need for change. Some would even say create survival anxiety, which is very harsh, but very interesting. And I'm going to cover that in another video. So reality strikes, you're not making money anymore, and suddenly you realize you have a big problem. And this is pulling you out of the stability, and you crash down into immobilization. So you don't know what to do. You're basically frozen in front of the screen. You look at the data. You don't know what to do. And once you get out of this immobilization, and I absolutely encourage you, if you're a change agent, try to get people out of that, because there are 2 areas, depression and fatalism, and immobilization, that is pretty bad, because people are frozen, they can't do anything, and that is simply not helpful for the process because there is no energy. So try to get them out of the immobilization. And very often people do that themselves, and then they start to deny what they see. They start to deny the facts, pure denial. And that is a defense mechanism, or can be a defense mechanism. And I'm going to talk about defense mechanisms in another video. So that makes it very tricky, because if you do not give people the escape lane, if you pin them down so that they cannot deny the facts anymore, you strip away the defenses that they have. But defenses are very important. Defenses are very helpful, because defenses protect your psychological safety. But unfortunately, you have to take them away from them if they don't overcome that stage, because it is limiting their performance. It is limiting their adaptation to the change process. Whatever happens, if they put away the denial, or if you manage them in a way that they cannot deny the facts anymore, they will become angry. And that is the next phase. And I actually don't find it that bad. For me, it is okay if people are angry, if people are mad at you, because this is where they have energy again. This is where they are alive. Tricky thing is, the energy is not going into the direction you want it to be, so you have to channel the anger in a way. And that's not very easy, that's tricky, and you have to be careful that it is not escalating. So you basically stay calm, try to guide people through, talk to them, what's in it for them, all these things, what are the benefits, the pros and cons, how does it impact them. Basically do a fair process with them. There is a nice article about that, and I'm going to link it in the description below or in this video. It is called Fair Process, so you will find it if you Google for it. So if the anger is going down more and more, sometimes people start to bargain, especially if you have layoffs. For example, I experienced that a couple of times. People start bargaining, and by the way, I did it myself once. I said, hey, can we do something else? We get rid of travel expenses, we don't do that, and then we can keep people and all that stuff. So people start to bargain, but very often they are unsuccessful. Bargaining doesn't help them. And then they fall into depression and fatalism. That is a huge problem. It's, if you remember the group stages, fight, flight, and there is a third one, fright, where people just lay down frozen and don't move, similar to an animal that is getting attacked and pretends it is dead. And that is a problem, as immobilization also is a problem. If people are depressed, if they give in to fatalism, it doesn't help anyone to cope with the change. So we have to get them out of this stage again. Because we are shaking them up again, which is absolutely necessary from my point of view at this stage, it might be possible that they are getting angry again. And you see, it is not a straight line, so you're not walking from A to B and check the boxes of each stage. You can jump back and forth a couple of times. So you can be in the angry phase, you can in the depression phase, you can immobilized, denial, and all these things. So that's why I said to you in the beginning, it's quite an interesting diagnostic tool to take a look at it. So let's get back to the curve. Once we push people further, once they try to adapt to the change, there is one tricky thing before the actual adaptation. It is testing and revenge. And I sometimes realize that phase in particular, as well as the bargaining phase, if I have students who fail an exam. They start to bargain, they have no chance, so I'm not going to correct the grade. They're getting fatalistic about it, they're getting, I wouldn't say depressed in a clinical way, but they're getting very sad about that. And then at one point they promise me revenge, they start to test me. And this is usually something where people call the lawyer, where they are writing emails to upper management, where they send so-called flame mails. That can also happen in the angry phase. But this is quite problematic, and hopefully it doesn't create too much micropolitics, it doesn't escalate, so that phase has to be managed very, very well, and then hopefully people will get into acceptance and adaptation. That will take a while, but, and it's hard to influence in many cases because people are very individual, but I would say this is, again, a very good diagnostic tool, not in a clinical way, of course, but in a metaphorical way. That's a good way of looking at people and figure out how are they doing? What is the next phase they will probably go through? And I also find it extremely helpful to show this slide to people when we start with the change process and prepare them to what's going on. And sometimes people realize, look, now I'm bargaining. Now I feel a bit bad about what is going on. I'm a bit fatalistic. What can we do about this? And sometimes they pull themselves out of the misery. So that was the Kubler-Ross model of grief, sometimes or more popularly referred to as the change curve. And like I said, quite an interesting tool to look at before you actually plan a change process.